and most successful companies share one thing: they develop their people. The Success Launch Point makes it simple with on-demand courses, live coaching, and a thriving professional community. Your team will gain confidence, sharpen skills, and deliver more value, while staying loyal to the company that invests in them. To take your workforce to the next level, check out modernobserver.com/launchpoint.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. Hi, everyone. I'm Bill Correll, your host and co-host, along with Jan Jeremias, one of my favorite people. The two of us are on a mission to bring a little bit of empowerment to people whenever we can. So as a result of that, we do this podcast, and then we have conversations that tend to go where they go, but sooner or later they come back around or are always kind of in the domain of empowerment. Hey, Jan, how are you doing today?
I'm all right, Bill. How are you?
I'm good. I'm a little bit flummoxed at the moment. I've been working hard on a project, getting, as my dad used to say, getting nowhere fast, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I did get some information to kind of break things loose a little bit before I got on the call here. So I'm more or less just kind of letting that sink in a little bit. So I want to just take a moment and just reflect on, well, to date, 2025, in my humble opinion, has gone by faster than any year in my life. It just seems like we started it about a month or two ago. And here we are. I mean, we're less than a month and a half away to 2026, and wrapping my mind around all the things that have occurred, all the things that are in process, it's probably a good time to just take a beat. And after we're done with this podcast, I'm probably going to sit and close my eyes for 15 minutes, put a timer on, and just see how that goes. The stuff with family and friends, business relationships, my new career, what my wife is doing, you know, at her ripe old age. A lot of people are retired by the time they get to where we are. Neither one of us is ready to hang up the dancing shoes yet, if you will. And as a result of that, I think I've got a pretty rigorous schedule, you know, for anybody, let alone somebody who should be, you know, writing letters to grandchildren or whatever it is that people traditionally did when they retired.
Yeah.
You're still pretty active as well, aren't you?
Yeah. I think sometimes I'm in the opposite. I think I feel a little tired. But yeah, just it's been a year. I think I feel a little bit tired. And in some ways I feel like this year has been very long. And in other ways I can't, like I'm with you. I can't believe that, you know, however many months have gone by, and you know, I'm just like, really, it's the end of November. I can't, like, where did it go kind of feeling. So I'm kind of feeling a little bit of both. It reminds me of when someone passes and then all of a sudden you realize, like my dad, it's going to be 3 years. And I'm like, feels like yesterday in some ways and feels like 3 years in other ways, you know, so.
That's getting murky for me too. You and I both lost our dads pretty close to the same time. It was early in late spring, if I remember correctly, and we more or less helped each other through that period of time. It was the word navigation gets used an awful lot, but it's a little different when you're totally in the dark, just kind of reaching around and trying to figure out where you are. But yes, I have kind of the same starting to blur in terms of my relationship to how I felt, all the other things that were going on at the time. And it does kind of tend to run together just a little bit, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it came to mind because last year, at the anniversary of his death passing, it was very hard. I know I was by myself. And I said to my mother when she was here, I said, I'm not going to be by myself this year. Like, I want to be with you. I don't want to be alone on that day.
Right.
And I think that, in some ways he's still so much here, obviously, because I think about it. But in other ways, I think the finality of it always kicks in. And also, I have a friend who lost her mother this weekend. So this, 4 days ago. So I think I'm thinking about it a lot over the past few days.
Yes.
Because all of a sudden it was reminding me of that whole situation. And I got into a conversation with a friend of mine we both have our fathers both passed around the same time that your father passed, Bill, too. And we were talking about that generation and just the difference. Like, there is this, I guess, because I spoke to my mom, and my mom has been back home now for like a week, and she's like, yes, I went through all the mail and I organized it, and I have a pile of stuff that needs to get addressed immediately. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I want to be her when I get to be her age, like, kind of thing. Like, this very much like, I'm here, and and I have, like, these are my tasks, or this is what I need to do and get it done, and kind of attitude. And so, yeah, always so she said to me, my friend said to me, because her mom's the same way. And we said, very interesting. Like, it was very much that generation of
Yep.
like, you didn't expect you didn't expect anything. Like, getting anything was like a gift or a blessing. And you would sort of, like, you didn't think you were here, you had a role to play, and you did that role. And it was just, I don't know, there's a very kind of a very, very, kind of a strength type of energy
Right.
that I feel like, I don't know how many people have nowadays.
It's interesting, you know, all of the things the words that we use and how we language different things. And just for conversational purposes, how old is your mom?
My mom is 89.
89. Yeah.
And my friend's mother, who I was on the phone with, is 91.
You know, it's ridiculous to think in terms of the way we've been raised. My due date for all of my life has been somewhere around 65 for good reasons. My family on both sides, the men have never been healthy. And, literally, we had, I would say, my grandfather passed when he was 66. And that was a lot. Both of his younger brothers passed before him. And then my mom passed at 79, and that was quite a while ago, 13 years ago. But the thing is that we had a thing called Huntington's disease in our family, and I've lost many relatives as a result of that. And so we didn't know until my mom was in her 50s, and there was actually DNA testing that was available by then, that we found out that we did not have that gene, okay, or the active portion of it. And if you don't know what Huntington's disease at home, it's a disease that comes on in your early to mid 40s that is a degenerative nervous system disease that affects your muscles, and your ability to retain weight, your ability to eat food and sustain yourself, but your mind doesn't lose a beat. It's like you've got who you are in this shell that's just becoming smaller and more frail, and that usually lasts. Typically, people pass in their late 50s to early 60s. So there was that. There was the heart attack, stroke, and all that sort of thing. But the male relatives in my family they were smokers, drinkers, never got any exercise. They were great athletes when they were kids, and many of them were active duty in World War II. But as time went on, they got sedentary jobs, so most of them didn't last all that long. I think the last thing too, this is not going to be something that everybody can understand in listening to it, but if you're of a certain age, we had a nuclear threat hanging over our heads. We, in school, went through these exercises in grammar school called duck and cover. And what that was to put your head under your desk in case if the siren went off, as if that were really going to do anything at all. So no matter how much time went by and how many different things happened, and then when, the Reagan era came and we signed all the documents and, put a detente and what have you, and we're not going to have a nuclear war, guys. That trauma lives in our body, for our entire lives. So there was all of that. And so I was kind of raised with, if you make it past 65, you're going to be in the bonus round. It's rarefied air in terms of our genetic structure. Well, it turns out that most of the things that happened in our family were not of nature. They were of, the surrounding environments and bad habits and that sort of thing. So I made some choices early on, not to smoke, to drink moderately, in some cases, and at the same time, get a little bit of exercise and kind of take care of myself a little bit. So I'm in pretty darn good health for somebody who's been through all the things that I have, and I'm not on any patent drugs. I'm not on any prescriptions or anything of that nature. And my dad made it until he was 88 years old. He was actually 2 months to the day prior to turning 89. But he could have gone on for a long time, but he fell and broke his hip. So I say all of that to say, here we are in November of 2025, and this year has just rocketed by. And I just wonder, are there people who are attempting to slow things down? And how do you go about doing that if you can?
Yeah, I think about that a lot. Spoke on Friday about stillness and basically slowing down for moments and, and non-forcing, and so it was a really beautiful conversation. But in that, I think there is this ability to slow down, to make choices and to prioritize stuff and realize that not everything demands your attention immediately. I think we have this feeling that if we slow down, we're going to miss something. Like things, and they do, technologically, things are moving very fast. Like things move fast. Right. I think we have this fear of missing out, of like, oh my gosh, like if I slow down for any lengthy period of time, I'm going to miss out, or I'm going to be so far behind, I won't be able to catch up.
Right.
And not to say there are areas of my life which I've done that. And now I'm catching up. But there are areas where I have to sit back and realize that, it's okay to slow down. It's okay to finish one thing at a time. It's okay to not get, to look and say, well, I'm not going to do that. I have these 5 other things to do, or these, do I really need to do that? And to start to prioritize. That's how I look at slowing down, because I feel like, I don't know, like I said, I think, trying to keep up all the time is exhausting.
It is. And I got to ask you a question while you're talking. I'm having this kind of, it's a thought about my calendar. And I think at some point in my life, space that was not occupied by some sort of an appointment or some thing to do bothered me. It was like it's sitting there, pointing an accusing finger at me, like, why aren't you more productive? Why aren't you, and the long and the short of it is, there was another point in my life where one of the things that I put on my calendar was a 25-minute nap. I would go crazy working from 6 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes I'd start off with 9 holes of golf at 6 o'clock in the morning because our office was located right next to the country club. And so I'd be the only one out on the course. And then at some point, the sprinklers would go on and off. And then the guys with the, trimming and mowing stuff would show up. And then I'd go back to the office until about 9 o'clock. But typically between 9:30 and 10 o'clock, everything was clear on my desk. I didn't put things on my desk to just have them there and stack them up, but I would take my shoes off and I had a pillow and I crawled up on top of my desk and I put the pillow under my head. And then I just tried to see if I could go to sleep for a half hour. And in those days, I could tell somebody out in the front office, please come wake me up in a half hour if I'm asleep, if I haven't come out yet. It was so revitalizing and so fulfilling. And the days that I never got to do that, because most of the time I would be going until 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And I think about all the things that I missed out on, the family events. And, I actually was so busy working in my business, I had tickets to every last one of the Yukon Final Fours for all the women and all the men from about 1995 when the women first started going up until about 2004. And I gave them away. I didn't go to St. Petersburg. I didn't go to Houston, Texas. I didn't go to Denver, Colorado. I didn't go wherever it was, right? And I think to myself, what are my choices going to look like for the next 20 years? Because I'm really planning on seeing if I can beat your mom, okay?
Mhm.
And my dad.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. I think about, I heard myself saying to myself a few weeks ago I had an extremely busy week. And on Saturdays, basically, I'm up at 4 because I have to travel an hour to teach. So I leave the house really early. And then, so basically I work from like 7 to like, now it's like 1 on Saturdays. And on Saturday afternoon, I did nothing. Like I sat on the sofa for like I don't know how many hours. And I had this feeling of like, oh, I was lazy. And then I thought to myself, like, I kind of looked at the comment in my head, like I'm on the little bubble in my head. And I said, okay, first of all, that's not logical because maybe today I'm being a little bit lazy, but that is not in my nature to be lazy. So I'm like sitting there going like, what are you saying to yourself? Like, and I think that that's our feeling is like, oh my gosh, I have this blank in my schedule. I'm being lazy or I'm not being productive. That's the big word. I'm not being productive. At least it's the big word for me. And then I have to step back and realize that, oh my gosh, like, it's when I jam pack my schedule and I don't move from my computer for 6 hours. First of all, my body is miserable because I'm so stiff that I can't move afterwards. Second of all, if I don't schedule in time to if I don't even have a time to go to the bathroom, to be like whatever, to take a restroom break, I'm like, who's making your schedule? I make my own schedule. And then I have to start to examine what's that about really? Like, what do I equate that busyness with? What is that busyness? What am I trying to accomplish? What am I trying to escape from, depending on my disposition and what I'm going through emotionally? Like, is it a bypass of trying to address the deeper calling or the deeper need that I have? And I've really begun to look at those things of okay, what is this? What's this really about? Busyness does not mean, depending on how you're busy, doesn't really mean that it's not a measure of success. It's not a measure of your worth.
Interesting. Yeah.
But that's where I am because I'm with you, Bill. I used to look at a blank in my schedule. I'd be like, oh my gosh, there's empty space.
Yeah. What am I missing? What am I getting behind on that I'm not thinking of? And you know what I'm reminded of someone when I was taking music, someone along the way in my life basically said, it's not the notes that make the world powerful in terms of music. It's the silences in between the notes that separates them and gives them definition and meaning. So if you think about that for a minute, when I guess there's a way you could look at your calendar and basically go, that white space is my time to really kind of connect, my time to think things over, my time to absorb all that's come in that day so far and kind of plan out a little bit where I'm going by the end of the day. And the whole notion that there's anything wrong with your calendar at all that's got to be so foreign to about 95% of the people on the planet who don't have a calendar. Why would you be dominated by something like a to-do list or a calendar? That's a first world problem, I think. I don't think folks in the Philippines or even in some parts of our country, I don't think it's on their mind at all. But there's the immediacy of all of this noise coming at us all the time. And I've been looking at a couple of different things where they're talking about boredom, the value and the joy of boredom.
Oh, I think that often. I think that, yeah, go ahead. But I have a lot, I think about boredom a lot.
Well, the thought is that we're so occupied all the time, the fuse gets burnt to the short bits and it never gets a chance to completely go back out to a full fuse again or choose to do something entirely different. So what does boredom mean? Boredom means there's work going on, there's occupational stuff, there's an opportunity to do something with your time, and what you're choosing to do is to be bored. And in one perspective, it's a luxury to have boredom the way that our culture works these days. Pretty much frowned upon. I mean, when was the last time you had somebody in a group just announce all of a sudden, I'd like to come back here again next week, but I'm bored. They don't say that out loud. They just don't come back. And they might not even identify with the fact that while they were there, they weren't engaged in a way that made them feel the normal stimulation that they get when they're listening to TV or have their iPhone in their hand, scrolling to see what the latest social media stuff is or what's going on X. So one of the people I've been listening to says, schedule boredom at least once a day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting that you say that because I realize that it's not necessarily boredom, but I committed I was going to do something like 20 minutes of creative, something like sort of a day in the mornings. And that just hasn't worked in my schedule with Tonka not being well and the fact that most of my quality time, if I have a quiet moment, I want to be with him at the moment. So I've switched it to kind of just sitting with him in silence. So basically meditating with him or sitting with him in silence. And there's something about the silence that goes to me with like boredom of not having that outward noise to distract me. And I think of boredom like, when we were kids, we would say, oh, I'm bored. And, my mother would tell us to go do something, find something to do or whatever. But when you were bored, you were also the most creative. You were the most, you had a moment to think and then all of a sudden you would do something that would be totally different. Because obviously whatever you had around you wasn't doing it for you, like you said. Yeah. Whether it be the toys you had at the time or it was, whatever it wasn't exciting you. And so then all of a sudden you would like spend a moment of like being bored. And at that moment you would sit there and say, oh my gosh, I'm going to grab my paints and paint, and paint, or I'm going to go outside and collect whatever, do this, or I'm going to, I think we would get so creative and so innovative.
Yeah.
That's why I think boredom is so valuable. I mean, when you fill your time and your space with whatever, whether it be necessary stuff or unnecessary stuff of like distracting yourself by binge watching or gaming or, playing on your phone, which I'm more than guilty of, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, you're not bored, but you're also, I don't know, you're escaping, you're not thinking, you're not present.
The thing that I'm hearing in all of that is, for instance, most of you at home, when you listen to our podcast, I'll bet you a nickel that 20 times during this hour, you're looking at your phone or you're glancing around to see if you've got any mail or there's something else coming in. But when you notice that you're losing interest in what's going on in front of you, that's like the doorstep of boredom, where you immediately have to fill it with something, some kind of stimulation. And sadly, in our cultural environment today, the stimulation is just so high. It takes a lot more than the usual to give you that, like there's a difference in a high that you can experience where the endorphins kick in and all of the other things that go along with being happy and really having some joy. And so what you're really doing is kind of numbing yourself to the opportunity to sense the ordinary in a particular way, in a way that you could actually be amazed by it. And if you think about when you've been asleep and you get up, how much more difficult is it to really find something that let's just say that engages your emotions and gives you a very strong reaction, as opposed to at the end of the day, when you're tired, you've done it all, and people still won't be quiet and let you have 5 minutes to yourself, but all you have to do is another hour of work and then you can get the hell out of here, And part of your distraction is thinking about what it's going to be like when you're not here, kind of creating that, or thinking about what didn't work during the course of the day, and pretty much zero time going into, let me just appreciate where I am right now. Let me just appreciate what's going on here. Let's just take a minute and just kind of let this in. There's neat stuff going on with the clouds in the sky. I mean, the sun's in a really neat place. Oh, by the way, I see that I've got this age on my lampshade where the material's starting to separate and I can see the light bulb through it. By the way, that lampshade is over 150 years old. It's like we don't value the mundane. We don't value what we consider to be the norm. However, those things that wow us are the things that other people are bored with. You and I save our money up and we wait for a period of time when we can focus on a particular thing, like going on a vacation somewhere. And there are other people that do that for a living. And quite frankly, they would give it up in a heartbeat to do some of the things that we're doing that we're bored with, They're just not part of their routine.
I think that idea of appreciation, that's something that can be learned and cultivated. I think you can train yourself to look to, some people, let's say, do it automatically.
Right.
I think others, you can train yourself to look for things you appreciate. I was listening to someone who was talking about her kids, and she was saying that when her kids were really small, she would actually send them out when they went to school that day. And she would basically say to them, like, their job was to find something that was like awe-inspiring or something that was, making something ordinary the extraordinary, like something in their way. And they had to come back and report to her every day. Like that was their had to come back and tell her what it was. And she was commenting that now, even though her kids are grown, they still text her those things. And I thought, one cool practice to like instill in children to go out into the world and look for something that's basically amazing. And that amazing could be the way the water like reflects off of a spider web. Yesterday I was sitting with a cup of tea and I was looking and we had that, I don't know, here we had like this torrential downpour for about 5 minutes. And then it stopped, and the way the water, like the sun was coming through the water and made like, you could see it was like almost like sparkling after that. And I was just staring at that, and then, but you have to be open to notice it. But I think you can train yourself to look for it too.
Yeah, the habits, that whole principle of what you do over and over and over again is what you master, you know?
Hmm.
And sometimes mastering the mundane is what makes life work. You stop and think about people who, for instance, in complicated jobs, doing the minuscule task work is something they race through and don't actually understand or spend the time to really do it well. And that's usually what they hire people, to do in place of themselves because they can't stand doing it. But as life goes on, it's kind of a kind of a funny thing that I've noticed with a bunch of different people. When my wife, for example, was much younger, there were certain things that really didn't appeal to her. And she spent most of her salad years and then beyond in an office being a crackerjack clerk, secretary, assistant to the vice president of a bank, et cetera, et cetera. When she got to the point during COVID that she was looking for another job, she didn't want to go find something like that. When there was an opportunity to go outside and go door to door, helping to complete the census, that appealed to her. And it was not something that she ever would have conjured up on her own until an opportunity presented itself. And she went to an invitational screening to see what the job was going to be and with a group of people. And so from there, when it was over, she had what I called postpartum symptoms from no longer being a census taker and moving all over the New England area, trying to find people and get questions answered. And then she, in December of 2021, started working as a part-timer at the post office. Now she's coming up on 5 years next month. That went by in a flash. She loves it. She's engaged. Her job requires that she be paying attention all the time. There are upsets. There are things that don't go well. There are trials and tribulations. But for the most part, she loves being autonomous. She loves having a situation where no one's looking over her shoulder. And she doesn't mind coming home tired and napping in the chair in the evening or sleeping in until 10 o'clock on her next day off. These are the things that her trade-offs. And, it occurs to me, although selfishly, I'd like to spend more time with her when she's sleeping, but I'm in awe of her ability to have found something that really lights her up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think finding a situation where you can get some support in doing things that don't seem they seem eccentric, to most of the other folks that you run with. And, she's been a professional woman all of her life. She's well educated, master's degree, et cetera, et cetera. And she likes working with her hands and talking to people and making people smile by handing them things.
I mean, I think it's important to find something that lights you up. that gets you excited. Mm. And, I'm listening to your story about your wife, and I'm thinking to myself, she's helping people. She's being with people, and I think I think that when things, I don't know, I know that when I do stuff that lights me up, and it's, almost always in a lot of it is in relation to other people. Yeah. So if so it is that feeling of like being able to help someone.
Yeah, that's immediate, isn't it? Over and over and over through the days. She has close to 500 mail stops on her route if everybody gets mail. And the truth is, some days she gets flyers or other flats or whatever, um, where she literally does have to stop at 5 mailboxes and put something in them. And that's in addition to getting out of the truck and taking stuff up and delivering it to the door. But I'm dwelling on her for a moment because the juxtaposition is that she spent probably 10 or 12 years um, being actually in pretty much semi-retirement. A few days a month doing reports for the state, federal government for my business, but really didn't have to do a heck of a lot else. And now this is the biggest thing on her schedule. Her primary responsibility is to make sure that the mail gets out when other people call in sick. So as a result of that, instead of working the original 2 days a week that she was supposed to, over the last, I don't know, actually 2 years more or less, but most of this year, she's worked an average of 4 to 7 days. She went over the last 60 days, she had 3 stints where she didn't have a day off in 16 days. I call that a young man's sport. That's the way I used to do stuff back when we didn't have 2 sticks, to rub together. The overtime was bankable money, and the straight time is how we paid our bills.
Yeah, I mean, I think that and some of it I look at, and maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I think it depends on, I don't know, like where and at what point you start doing that. I think that, maybe I'm feeling my age these days.
Tell me about, I mean, that's an important sentence you just said, in my humble opinion.
Well, I think that I look and um I got a lot of advice from a lot of people, because they're always like, "Oh, you have so many great skills, you should do this. You should make this a career, you should add this to what you do," kind of thing. And I look at them and I'm like, maybe I could have done that 10, 15 years ago or 20 years ago when I first started my business. But at this point, there are only so many hours in a day. And I don't really think that I have the energy at this point to do that.
Right.
That's what I'm saying is like, and I am. I'm not saying that I'm not. I'm good at many things. But at some point or another, I have to say, okay, well, you know what, you know, so I think that that's what I'm trying to say is I think that, sometimes it comes, not to say that people, it comes at a point where I don't want to say it's too late, but it comes at a point, it's just not the right time.
So the sentence that I asked you to expound on is something I hear a lot, and I'll quote what I think I heard you say and maybe have a couple of things to comment about that. I guess I'm just feeling my age. And I think there's layers there, in terms of, am I feeling it physically? Am I feeling it like, do I need to refocus on something that I'm really good to add that into what I'm doing? Or should I be where I'm, in life selecting things to put down and stop doing? you know? And how much time really goes into examining how we feel on a daily basis so that we could take appropriate action. And from my own perspective, I know that there are habits that I need to form to be able to do what I do for a living now well. And I'm satisfied with not knowing how to do it at this particular moment. And this is the first time in my life where I can tell you that I really was not champing at the bit to figure out how to routinize something or, put everything into a plan. That's a little disorienting. I've never operated this way, Jan. It's not bad, but it is quite different. So the comment is, what you do infrequently rarely creates a habit. And the distinction of habits is what you do over and over and over again. You have the effect of approaching mastery, if you will. Those are those things that become automatic that you can do in your sleep. That when you first started, it felt like you were putting on somebody else's shoes. It didn't fit. It felt really awkward. I think, as we go through life, I don't know about you, but when I say that I'm feeling my age, there's a lot going on there. It's more like a stew than it is a piece of bologna, like not one thing. There's a lot of thoughts going on there. There's the thought of, again, today I heard about somebody else passing that was unexpected. Again, today I heard about somebody else who just had an achievement in their job. Again, today I heard about a relative that had a milestone in their relationship and married for 40 years or 50 years or something like that. And all of these things kind of bring to mind my own temporality. Where am I really in the continuum between birth and, what comes next? I don't think about what comes next all that often. Simply because I don't have a reason. I just don't. I used to, but I made it past Huntington's disease. I made it past the nuclear holocaust. I made it past, having a stroke or heart attack by the time I was 50 or 60 years old. Those aren't the things that I worry about anymore. I did look at my life for a long time as if there was a sale date. And that gave me an urgency. And so I used that urgency probably to accomplish a heck of a lot. Focusing in one particular area, as I was mentioning before, probably being involved in far too many diverse things. And at the same time, not really fully appreciating, understanding, and absorbing and being in the middle. It was more like consuming than enjoying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like there wasn't what I want. It was almost like crossing off something off of a to-do list versus appreciating the moments.
Yeah. There was a period of time where I actually was working on a habit to have everything that I did be blessed and be meaningful because it had 100% of what I could do well. Then busier I got, the busier I got. It seems like that's just kind of how it gets. More busyness begets more busyness. And yeah, the to-do list was where I got my satisfaction, crossing those bad boys off.
Yeah, yeah, I guess I'm just at this place now where I really am trying to look at, I guess I speak, I guess, appreciation, but to me, it's beyond that. It's motivation. Like, what is my motivation behind what I'm doing? Motivation meaning, you know, for the why. Like, why am I doing it? And, you know, what is the motivation behind it? Is it so that I can feel better about myself? Is it so that I can look good to other people? Is it so that I can, what is the motivation? Is it because I don't want to deal with, something else? Like, what is the motivation behind what I do? Is that lately where I'm spending a lot of time, I think, in this kind of, yeah, I think it's become very important to me to look at that kind of stuff and to look at it with an element of compassion and curiosity, of like looking deeper beyond the surface of what it actually is.
It's so that really communicates. And essentially, the word motivation, we've been raised on that. I don't know, I have since I was in my 20s. The whole self-help movement and motivational speakers, and where I think they really, they meant inspirational, but what I'm hearing from you is what's behind the choice that I made to be doing what I'm doing right now. Are you always satisfied that you get an answer to that question?
No. And sometimes, no. And I think sometimes sometimes I'm in a space where I don't really need to know the answer. I mean, it needs to get done, it needs to get done, whatever. But sometimes I have to examine and sit there and say, and I'm just starting to really explore it, because I think most of the time, the motivation behind it, or a lot of the time, and I guess I can speak from personal experience, is there is something deeper, whether it's this feeling of I'm not feeling overly secure at the moment, or I'm feeling lonely at the moment, or, and I think some of that stuff is very hard to look at.
Yes.
And so I can't say that I do it all the time, because, it's a lot of energy to kind of look at those deep feelings or deep things that we don't really want to look at. And so to sit there and say, okay, well, I'm busy because the house is quiet and I'm lonely, I can say that. But then the next step is like, okay, well, what do I do about it? Or if I don't want to feel lonely and I don't want to do, like, and I'm realizing that I'm using that as a means by which to distract myself from that feeling.
Right.
Well, if I don't want to, like, basically I have to do something about that. And so what am I going to do about that? So I think that it opens up, but there is room now to, like, kind of sit there and start to look at that. Like, that's where I think I'm spending a lot of time at the moment, personally, like I said.
What I love about what you're saying, Jan, is that, it arouses curiosity in me in terms of, how does that look? How does it work? I can tell you that there have been times when I was in a course of study, in my self-help journey, if you will, of trying to understand my feelings. And it was always pretty dicey for me, the ability to identify a feeling. I usually lost the handle on it after a few moments, because once I started trying to name the feeling was gone. It wasn't there anymore. So now I'm naming a memory. I'm not naming the feeling any longer. And so at some point, I just, after kind of journaling and writing these things down, I started going back and rereading what I had journaled. And they didn't get me back to where I was feeling before. So that's either because I was a poor communicator and I didn't translate my feeling thoughts into language that could take me back there, or there's something about feelings that are temporary, fleeting, and really hard to duplicate or replicate. And when that goes on, I almost wonder, I guess the need to understand what a feeling is satisfied by making a decision of what you're going to do next, maybe.
And also, I think that for me, like when I start to, if I can get to a place of like, what does this, like to bring it into a sensation, like a
Yes.
physical reaction, and I can get clearer on that feeling. So, I had a fluttering in my heart or my breath caught or, like some sort of, I all of a sudden I got really warm. Like, all of a sudden that sort of specificity allows me to sort of to process whatever that is for me. Just the words, and sometimes words, but the combination, I guess, is what allows me to get to that or to sort of decipher or to investigate what that's really that emotion is or whatever the motivation behind something
Right.
and the emotion that was like to it. But as if I can get that basically into the sensation of it.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, if you've got the time, the inclination, and the ability to focus and distinguish, that sounds to me like a practice that has got many possible great outcomes. And at the same time, I actually wonder if there's enduring value in getting an answer to a question. I mean, I always kind of like discounted it by saying it probably was gas, or something of that nature that sounds funny, but the and even the whole idea of sort of wanting to find value in a practice without really getting to the point where it's facile and that you can make changes to it subtly and really kind of focus and drill down and hone in on something in a powerful way. I gotta, turn myself in. That's always been maybe one of my failings or one of my weak suits. I've never been able to sustain the interest. I get, this is the way I would say it now. I've never been able to sustain the interest in finding out what it is that I'm feeling long enough to really ever get there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's why, to me, why certain scenarios keep on happening over and over and over again.
Right.
I think and that's why we get them. And if we're willing to look at each, at all those similar situations, then we may have time to get an answer or to get further clarity. I guess the answer is a wrong word. I like clarity better. We get clearer on it, even if we don't, it just becomes a little bit of a deeper um, look at some of who we are for me,
Yeah.
and not in a negative way. It just, I think I end up having a little bit more compassion for myself and understanding because all of a sudden it explains like certain habits or certain traits. And I understand, and I'm a little bit less critical of what has evolved and why I have evolved the way I have, like, oh, okay, well, that's understandable. Like, look at that situation. Well, it kind of makes sense that this is the way you would react or you would distract yourself because it was painful. And even if that's enough, but I think I look at it in this kind of this investigation into discovering like and and that discovery being a way to find more compassion and appreciation for myself. And therefore, my attitude is the more you appreciate yourself and compassion for yourself, it only deepens your that ability for others. Like it only spreads. I don't think you become more compassionate about yourself and then become, excuse my French, but become an asshole to everybody else. Like, I don't think that happens. I mean, personally, I think that what happens is that you hopefully are then more compassionate to other people.
There's a lot of brilliance in what I hear you saying, and that is that most people who are um, um, typically offensive to other people in their behavior have spent no time whatsoever ever thinking about how bad they are to themselves. And I've always walked out of situations where somebody was antisocial or just plain ugly, if you will, knowing that, wherever they go, that's where they are. They're always going to have that with them. And then I changed that in my mind to compassion and thinking, that's kind of sad. And if I could give them a hug and make that all disappear, I'd be willing to do that.
hmm Well, I was on a meeting the other day, and this woman said something about, we were talking about, I was talking about compassion and, for yourself and things like that. And then, appreciating yourself or whatever. And she made the comment of basically disliking herself. And she didn't really think that one had anything to do with the other.
Right?
And I'm not saying, I mean, I don't know her that well, so I can't, but I don't envision her as being an unkind person at all. And I'm not saying that, you can dislike yourself and still be a kind person. I just think that one is, what's the motivation behind that is one of my questions, and then the other thing is, I think it deepens. I think you become more kind, more compassionate if you have a better understanding of yourself. Because in that better understanding, you recognize that, your gifts, you recognize your flaws, you recognize that you're not perfect, nor is anyone else. And I think that, that's, to me, empowering.
Well, my takeaway from everything I'm hearing from you is just this thought that the senior level of this conversation is really high on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That 80% of the pyramid never gets to a point where they've even got the time to spend in this inquiry whatsoever, nor would anybody bring it up to them as a suggestion. But that you are having these conversations and thoughts, what I have to say about that is that this is what starts to make it available to more people, that if there's value in something like this, people have to discover it for themselves. Because what gives you value and what gives me value may not translate into somebody else as being a solution to anything or as a bridge to something. But I always say, if you hear something that seems like a pretty good idea, give it a shot. See if there's something there for you. And what I also hear you saying is that you put a lot of thought into all of this. There are people who have a self with a with a lowercase s. That means they haven't done much work on it. They haven't really thought about how they're building themselves and how they want to show up in the world. But one of the things I like about being around you, Jan, is that this is something you've spent most of your adult life being aware of, looking into, discovering, asking questions, being really, really curious about. And I think that inquiry that you've been on, when you share it, especially when you share it with me, I can talk for that. It gives me a couple of different things. It gives me hope. And hope means that, if you think there might be something out there in the future, it's always good to hear where other people have had experience and success in it, so that it starts to look like a journey that's worth your while, right? And not just a fool's errand. And I think the other part of it is, I've for a long time said that no matter how much we try to understand other people, in the end, all we do is learn more about ourselves. Simply, I can't be in your body and hear your thoughts. That's never going to happen.
Mhm.
But the more we exchange and create new language, the more we start to get an understanding and an aha moment. Then I start to see what it feels like to me to entertain the thoughts that I hear you talking about or expressing. But the whole notion of being a kind person with the motivation of being that way to yourself first and then to other people, I think that's going to translate into some people's listening. I think there are people out there who are going to say, yeah, I get that.
I mean, I hope so, having been unkind to myself for many years, to be a self-confessed, like
Not to say that it's been more than a few hours since the last time you were that way, right?
exactly, exactly. Um, it seems like, it just seems like a very harsh way to navigate the world, always being self-critical and self-berating or thinking that you're not measuring up.
Right.
And so I think that when I look at that, then to me it's a worthwhile thing to explore.
Right.
Um, because I've always been, of the philosophy or of the belief since I started practicing yoga and I became sort of more aware that how I was is basically how I am, is how I go out into the world. And if I go out feeling horrible about myself or being horrible about life, everybody who I encounter is influenced or is affected by that energy or by what I do. So to me, it was always worthwhile because I felt like, well, if I go out into the world as a better person, then that's the only way the world's going to get better is one person at a time.
It's a powerful statement to say it starts with me.
Yeah, no, I really do in that way and not in a selfish way, but I agree. I, not, my teacher, Jenny, joking, like in a way, jokingly or whatever, she was very, very, very funny. And she was very much like she was grandma instead of grandma. She was very like, she was adorable, but, and so she used to say, and it's all about me, but this is like, yeah, it really is all about us in that way, not in a selfish kind of way, if anything, in an unselfish kind of way.
It's being responsible, isn't it? For
Yes.
having accountability for, yeah, I know, and I may be trying to be kind, but I might show up in your world, as we were talking earlier, as an asshole. Okay. But if you let me know that's how I'm coming across, I might actually do something about it.
That's right. Exactly.
Anyway, great conversation again, my friend. We're at the witching hour.
You're at the witching hour. Oh no.
So, with that in mind, any summary thoughts or any last thought you'd like to leave folks with?
I'm reminded of a story of one of my teachers who came in to teach one day, and she said that she had had this horrible morning, and it was her demonstration, or what she believed was her demonstration of how she was influenced, like her environment, the people who she was with.
Right.
Is she got up and her husband snapped at her. And so she got upset because there wasn't really any reason for it. And she went and she snapped at her kids because that's where the energy was directed at the time.
Right.
And then her son went to school and had a fight and she got a call from the principal. And so she said, all I could think of was the fact that I had snapped at him and my husband had snapped at me. And it was like a direct ripple that went out, from our immediate home. And I remember hearing that story. And then all of a sudden, it was kind of one of the stories that kind of how I show up is, influences everybody who was around me. If I go out and I thank people, in the grocery store or I, cut someone off, that is affecting. So just maybe check in with yourself would be my advice to everybody. We'll check in.
Sounds like good advice to me. So I think with that said, I will leave our folks at home with an invitation and to you too, Jan. We all have people in our lives that we know, like, and trust. We love, as a matter of fact. And those are the folks we should reach out to or could reach out to. And will you reach out to and just let them know that your world works because they're in it. And if they ever need you at any time, night or day, that you'll be there for them. And tell them to test you. Tell them to just try it. Like they used to say on the Alka-Seltzer commercial, try it, you'll like it, But I think in the meantime, we're all here for each other. And it's a good thing to practice self-love. And you can do that a lot, like I said before, by reaching out and doing something that might be uncomfortable, but might make all the difference at some point, and just let people know you're there for them. Anything else, my friend?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Well, thank you, Jan Jeremias, for accompanying me in these conversations. I really do love it. We are lighting the candle, a world that works. And I will give you this entreaty, which is go out into the world and live your most fabulous life. And then please come back and tell me all about it. Bye for now.
Bye-bye, everybody.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a World That Works, part of the Xvadio Podcast Network. You can catch every episode of Lighting the Candle, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.